Welcome back to the Gradually Well podcast. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you are here. I am very excited about this episode because I have some exciting news. I am starting to do visual podcasts. I'm going to be recording the show. So if you are interested in a visual version of the show, you can tune into my YouTube page, which is the same name, Gradually Well Podcast. It'll come right up and you can have me playing in the background or watching me as I discuss the topic that we're going to talk about for the day. So this is very exciting. It's lots of experimenting. I've never done anything like this before, and I'm sure I'm going to get better along the way. Feel free to give me comments and tips and just feedback on how the experience is for you if you decide to check out the YouTube and watch the video version. I would love to hear from you guys. So that's the exciting news for today. Also, I have actually recorded this episode before. This is my second time recording it. And the first time I recorded it, it wasn't a visual recording of it. I just did the audio like I usually do. And I was fine recording it, but something just felt like off. Something felt like it was missing, and I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was because I felt like I talked about everything that I wanted to, but something just wasn't sitting right. So I took a minute, I stopped editing it, I took a break, I had talked to some friends, some family, some people on social media, and then I had even listened to a couple other different podcasts just for inspiration. And it was crazy because there were a few things that just aligned that day. It's like, oh, whoa, so-and-so mentioned this and now you're mentioning this. So I took all of those different alignments as signs of what I needed to kind of change about the episode. So I decided to re-record it because I'm just way more at peace with what we're going to talk about today and how this recording is going to go. And I am convinced that somebody needs to hear this. What I'm saying in this recording of it that I didn't say in the last one just must really be for somebody out there that needs to hear it. So I hope it resonates with you. This week, we're going to be continuing on our journey of exploring the different dimensions of wellness. So far, we have covered social, emotional, and environmental wellness. This week, we are moving on to occupational wellness. And it's kind of crazy because after this episode, we're going to be halfway through the series. There's 8 dimensions that we're covering. So this is going to be the 4th one. And then we're halfway through. I'm excited about talking about occupational wellness because we're going to talk about what it is, like define it and everything. But the fun part, other than my story part, is talking about there being times in life where there's points in your life where you want to achieve something, but it just feels like you can't. You want to achieve something maybe related to your goals career-wise, and life keeps getting in the way. And this is the part of the podcast that I didn't include in the first episode. I had listened to a couple different ones. Shout out to my mom for sending me one of the podcasts that inspired me to talk about this. It was by Chrsytal Evans Hurst. The name is slipping my mind right now. I can't believe it. I listen to it all the time, but I'll have it in the show notes. So I listened to one of her episodes, an interview that she did. And then I also listened to Aisha Beau's podcast. She had a 5-minute episode that she uploaded, and I thought it was really good. And I listened to it that same day that I was taking a break and reevaluating mine. So between those 2 podcasts and a conversation with my mom, they kind of inspired this episode. So I really hope you enjoy it. I'm so excited to share. So, okay, enough going through all of that. Let's get into it. So what is occupational wellness? If you're like me, you may not have ever heard those 2 words paired together, occupational wellness. And it is a thing. And what it actually is about is more so your attitude towards your work. It's more about your perception of it and your attitude towards it rather than what you're actually doing. It's not about your job title. It's about what about your job is gratifying to you. And I also want to say before we continue that when I'm talking about work and occupations here, I'm not just talking to the people that are in your typical 9-to-5 kind of setup, and even just the entrepreneurs out there. I'm definitely talking to both. I'm talking to the people who are working, but it may not be what you think of when you think of traditional work. I'm talking about you students, and I'm talking about you moms, specifically like stay-at-home moms that are not working a traditional job, because I have been both a student and a mom. I am a work from home mom right now, but I recognize that being a student is work and being a mom is work. Those are both, in my opinion, those are jobs, and they can take up a lot of your time, and they can take up just as much time as somebody that works a regular full-time job or more in a lot of cases. So I'm saying occupational wellness, but this is really for anybody who considers what they do to be their work. So don't feel excluded or that you can't listen if you don't fall into the traditional style of work, because you could definitely benefit from this conversation. Now, Bill Hetler, who is one of the founders of the National Wellness Institute, goes into more about what occupational wellness is, and he explains that 2 tenets. So the first one being, it is better to choose a career which is consistent to our personal values, interests, and beliefs than to select one that is unrewarding to us. And then the second tenet is that it is better to develop functional, transferable skills through structured involvement opportunities than to remain inactive and uninvolved. Now, why is that? Why is it more important to choose something that challenges us and is inspirational and motivational to us? Why is that so important? And my theory is it's because all the dimensions of wellness, these 8 dimensions that we're going through, they're interrelated and they impact each other. So when one dimension isn't satisfying to you, it's going to affect the well-being of the other dimension. So if you have your occupational, your career wellness dimension, and it is really low on the satisfactory scale for you, and you're just completely unhappy with it, it can definitely affect your emotional wellness, your environmental wellness, your social wellness. It can really begin to seep into the other areas. So that's my theory as to why Bill Hetler is saying it is way better to choose something where you're focusing on your skill and something that is motivational and inspiring to you versus a job title per se. That's another reason why I'm including non-traditional types of work, like being a student or being a stay-at-home mom, because for some people that is a very motivating, inspiring, fulfilling thing to do, and for others it is not. The other thing that I wanted to bring up when it came to occupational wellness, I feel like people were kind of getting a sense of what Bill Hetler has been saying, and I saw for a while, I feel like this past year or so, that maybe there was a trend, I guess I would say it was, where people were just talking about building streams of income and using your hobby to get income, like monetize your skills, monetize your abilities. And while that is really cool and, really gratifying, I think it's great if you can get paid to do something that you love. Like, why not love what you do? That is what we're saying, right? And Bill Hetler's tenet. So it kind of became like this trend of, oh, okay, just get paid to do what you love. Just whatever skill. If you make crafts, sell those. If you do whatever to monetize it. And then I feel like, of course, with every trend, once it gets really popular, you get the opposite of that. Like, not everybody has to do that. So then you have these people that are saying, you can just have a hobby. You don't have to monetize everything. Yes, it's great to have multiple streams of income, but if you enjoy knitting, you don't want the pressure of making it a business, don't do that. And I think that is great as well. I think both sides have good points, right? If you are looking to monetize a hobby, amazing. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. There's not a right answer. I think it's dependent on what's good for you. But I do think that they both offer some feedback that maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle, that whatever you decide to do for your income, you should try to enjoy it a little bit. That's going to be satisfying to you. And at the same time, you should have things outside of work that you enjoy, right? So that's somewhere in the middle. And I just thought of that because it related to what Bill Hetler was saying about enjoying what you do. And Because I keep mentioning how with occupational wellness that it's not necessarily just pertaining to the people that are working your traditional types of work, and looping in what we talked about with Bill Hetler's definition or what it all includes, and I kind of want to share my story with my career and occupational wellness and how it has not been linear at all, and it's definitely an ongoing thing that I am developing and journeying through. So I want to dive into that today. So years ago, after I graduated from my undergrad degree, I started working at a dermatology office. I had just decided, not even a full year before I graduated, that I wanted to go into healthcare. Wasn't quite sure exactly the direction, but I was very motivated, just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited. I had a friend that ended up helping me get a job at a dermatology office as a receptionist. And when I tell you I loved that job, I loved it. And it's crazy because who would have thought that after graduating and my first job being as a receptionist that I would feel like I was on cloud nine? But I did. And I felt like this sounds dramatic. It really does. But I honestly felt like I was walking through the halls of inspiration, walking through that dermatology office. Anytime I was going to the back to give the doctors or the assistant whatever paperwork for the patient. But let me tell you why I felt that way. I felt that way because there was opportunities there for me. I was like, oh my goodness, yes, I have my foot in the door of healthcare without a healthcare degree. So that was just encouraging to me. And then I remember in my interview, I had explained what I wanted to do. I wanted to go further and get a graduate degree in a health-related profession. And in the interview, they explained that there were definitely opportunities to grow and to move to the clinical side of the job. So that was really inspiring. So I went into taking that job as a receptionist with the mindset that okay, there's opportunity here. So it's up to me to be good at my job. So when the opportunity arises, they are ready and willing to give me the chance to switch to clinical. And I held on to that. And that's exactly what happened. I spent several years there and I worked as a receptionist. Then I became a doctor's assistant, which was similar to a medical assistant. And then by the time I left, I ended up being able to do biopsies on patients. I was giving biopsy results. I was assisting in skin cancer surgeries and other different procedures. I learned how to do sutures or stitches. And that was just so amazing to me because I did what I had wanted to do when I first got hired there as a receptionist. I saw the vision, I worked for it, I found a job that offered me challenge and inspiration, and it really worked out really well for me. The only reason why I left that job, you may be wondering, oh, Mariah, if you loved it so much, why in the world did you leave? Well, I went on to go back to school. So fast forward to me completing the program that I left my job at the dermatology office for. I finished that job and I had been preparing to re-enter the workforce. I was interested in going back into a clinical setting, and I'm not done with school. I'm going to go back, hopefully, to become a physician assistant is the end goal right now. But in the meantime, since I had finished that second program, I was going to get a job in the clinical setting in the meantime and hopefully be able to feel how I felt at the dermatology office. At least that was the plan, right? And I was just so excited. I knew I had done it before. I was one of those people that was blessed enough to have experienced loving a job before. And I have worked other jobs that I did not love and it did not resonate with me at all. And I quit after a couple weeks there. But because I had such a positive experience at the dermatology office, I just assumed that once I was done with school, I wasn't going to not be able to experience that again. I was going to be able to jump right back into something like that. And it was going to go the way that I wanted it to until it didn't. So what held me up after I finished my program was that I was going to school in Philly. Loved the area, wanted to do PA school there. My husband and I were living there. Then his job required him to move. And so the plan was for me to finish my schooling up in Philly. And then after that, I was going to relocate with him in Tennessee, which is where I am now. And I was like, I was fine with that. It's not what I wanted. Tennessee is much different than Philly and Pennsylvania. So it was a big adjustment, but definitely willing to do it. So I was ready to do that. But then I was in my last semester of school, which was a little stressful, preparing for a big move, being in a long distance relationship. And I mentioned this in my first episode. So if you haven't checked that out, you should go hear more about the details of that story. But so my husband and I were doing long distance marriage. He would come visit me and everything. So anyway, long story short, I get pregnant before I'm done. I didn't know how to take that. It was a lot to take in because I feel like I did have a lot on my plate already. And that was the one thing that I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to work the kind of job that I want to, especially it's not like I'd be going back to a job while being pregnant. I'd be trying to find a new job, and the healthcare has just been hammered with so many sicknesses and everything since the pandemic. And I didn't know what I'd be comfortable with while being pregnant. And I just knew, oh my goodness, I'm going to a new state. Close family and friends aren't there. This isn't going to look the way that I envisioned for it to look at all. And I really did struggle with the timing of my pregnancy. And I've really felt overwhelmed by the thought that I wasn't ready. And slight tangent here. I know people say that you're never ready for kids, but I honestly don't really like that statement because I kind of feel like it diminishes people's real concerns and experiences when they say they aren't ready. Because, for example, let's not act like there's not a difference between the couple that has been preparing for a baby, that has been hoping and wishing for one, and they have created a lifestyle where they don't have any major physical needs they're not wanting in any area. They are financially prepared. They are stable in their careers or whatever. Not that you have to be that to have a child, not at all, but I'm just making a point that you have that couple versus people that are not having their life together, right? So both couples may not know, or both people, it's not always couples that get pregnant, both people may not know what exactly to expect when a baby enters their life. But let's not act like one it cannot be more ready than the other one. And not even just with like the physical needs as far as like finances and living situations and careers. I'm talking about even emotionally ready. So for me, I felt like the timing was such a struggle because there was a lot of ways that I wasn't ready. I was trying to re-enter the workforce after being in school. I was getting my finances together after being on a college student level budget. I wasn't emotionally prepared for that at all. So that was a really big struggle for me. And while I did choose to remain pregnant, I just had so many conflicting feelings. I knew that I could get ready and be prepared to welcome a exciting time in my life. And I recognized the beauty of life and I wanted the baby. I did. But in the same breath, I felt like I had to grieve the life that I wasn't going to be able to live, the one that I had been preparing for the past couple years, the one that I had been looking forward to, the one that I had been envisioning to re-experience. I had to honestly grieve it, and I couldn't articulate that at the time. So I feel like those that were close to me, I don't know their full feelings about it, but I feel like it was maybe weird or uncomfortable or hard to understand why I was so sad, but yet going through with pregnancy. I just couldn't articulate it. I really couldn't in a way that I think people will understand because I myself didn't understand that. I think I was actually going through grief. And it lasted, unfortunately, the majority, if not the entirety of my pregnancy, where I just felt so sad about my situation, but also wanting to move forward with the baby. Very interesting. And I felt like it was even harder because it also kind of felt isolating. I have lots of different women in my life, and I have only really personally talked to women that have kind of always wanted to be moms or had just was excited about when they got pregnant. I didn't personally know anybody that related to what I was going through, or I hadn't talked to anybody on a personal level about that. So it kind of felt isolating because I didn't feel like I had anybody that fully understood it. My friends and family did an amazing job as being as empathetic as they could and as supportive as they could. And I really appreciate them for their support for that. It was just hard because I think I felt almost bad and kind of shameful that I wasn't able to enjoy being pregnant like so many of the women in my life had. I was not ecstatic about being a mom, but yet I was wanting to prepare to be a mom, even though I was not excited about the timing. This could be sounding crazy, but this is just how I felt. And I knew that in order for me to be able to be ready when the baby came, in order for me to show up as the type of mom that I knew I wanted to be, that I could not stifle my feelings for anybody else. I had to let myself feel what I was feeling. Otherwise, it was going to show up when the baby came. So I knew that, but also as a pregnant woman, it's hard to hide your emotions. Well, at least for me, I'm not sure about all pregnant women, but for me, when I was pregnant, it was very hard for me to stifle my emotions. So I just had to let myself go through that really grieving process of the life I had been preparing for and envisioning and working towards for the past couple years. I had to kind of mourn it. And it wasn't in a sense that I was like, oh, I'm never going to be able to get into the workforce. I'm never going to be able to feel like how I felt when I was working in the dermatology office. Because I know that children, they change their lives, but for me, I don't feel like my kid is going to hold me back from what I want to do. It's just going to look different. But I just felt like, man, the specific life that I had envisioned was no longer going to ever happen. And I had just never thought that life would get in the way. And it wasn't a tragic thing that was getting in the way. It was a beautiful thing, but it was changing my plans in a dramatic way. And it was going to change the trajectory of my life forever. So I had to go through that grieving process. And it was very, I don't know the best way to describe it, but it was hard and it was emotional and I didn't know how to articulate it. And I didn't know many other women that felt similarly to me. So that was just me really struggling with the timing of my pregnancy. And then, with that on top of the whole moving away from friends and family to a whole different state, the best part about it was that I got to be reunited with my husband. So I did look forward to that. But finding that out during my last semester of school and preparing for a big move, it was just like so overwhelming in so many ways that all I really could experience was strong feelings of sadness because I genuinely now in hindsight believe I was going through a mourning, as dramatic as that sounds. So while all that sacrificing was willing, it was still just very much a sacrifice. And it made me put a pause on my career goals in a way that I had never expected it to. And I will just say that while it did put a pause on my goals and everything, and I am not where I thought I would be. It's been a full year. I actually finished my program in the winter of 2021. So now it's winter 2022. So now it's a full year post that experience. And I am definitely nowhere where I thought I would be, but it's not, I don't mean that in a negative way, because while I'm not where I thought I would be in my career, it was just a pause. And I think this whole experience has helped me really learn what works for me and how I can still be satisfied and be feeling like I'm living to my fullest potential in other ways. I had to learn what momming was going to look like for me. So I had said earlier that I was never a girl that always knew I wanted to be a mom. And so I never really dreamt about being a stay-at-home mom. So I knew that I wanted to be in the workforce, and I still do. I still want to go to a job. And right now I had to find what that looks for me, because now I'm kind of torn. I'm like, oh, I do want to be with my baby, but I also want to work. So I had to meet somewhere in the middle. And currently I'm working a remote work from home job, and I kind of get the best of both worlds. It's definitely not easy doing that, but it does fill me up in a lot of ways. I don't feel like I'm missing out, and I also feel like I'm filling my cup. I'm not just letting it run dry. No, I do eventually want to go back to working in a clinical setting, but for now, this is what works. I'm sharing all of this not to just talk about myself. I'm sharing this because I see what Bill Hetler was saying, and choosing careers and occupations that really work on your skills and help you develop your skills and inspire and challenge you, because life is going to happen. Life is going to hit. There's going to be unexpected turns in our lives where things aren't going to happen the way that we want them to. Like for me, it was pregnancy, but I did learn skills and I did experience a job that was motivational and challenging and inspirational. So I know what to look for in my next job. With my current job that I work, it does still fill me up, not in the same way as dermatology did in the clinical way, but in another way. I think I do very important work. I work in the public health field right now, and that is gratifying to me. And then I had to find the inspiration and motivation in other ways. For instance, like with this podcast, I started this postpartum because I knew that I wanted to talk about health and wellness and create an outlet where I could do that. And this is a type of work for me. That's back to where it's a hobby, but it's something I could definitely monetize in the future. So that's me finding the work that, yes, pays the bills. Because let's be honest, and we're going to talk about that. We do need jobs to pay the bills, but I'm also choosing to do things that fill me up. My current job, it is not what it was, like the clinical in-person thing, but I did choose something that it still aligns with my values. And where it was lacking, I chose to pick up that other inspiration and motivation in a hobby, which is this podcast. So while I am not working in a setting that I thought I would be a year ago, I am still getting a lot of those gratifying feelings. And I feel like I would rate my occupational wellness pretty high right now, because I am in a space where I am regularly inspired and motivated and challenged, and my skills are still being developed, you know? So that's why I share my story with pregnancy and how it's affected my career and my occupational wellness, and how looking at occupational wellness as how it gratifies and builds you up versus just focusing on the job title is a great way to maybe try new things and be open to careers and opportunities that may not look exactly how you thought they would look, but they could be very gratifying for you. Now, as I mentioned, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking jobs that you need to pay the bills. Like, in fact, you should. If you need to pay your bills, you shouldn't just wait around for something that you're passionate about and let your bills not be paid. Take something in the meantime, maybe that's somewhat interesting, or sometimes you can't even wait for that. I've had to do that. I worked a phone service, customer service job for a little bit, and I absolutely hated it, but I did it, and I found ways to meet my other needs through hobbies. But anyway, while we may have to take jobs that aren't soul-filling, and we sometimes just have to do what we need to do to pay the bills, I think it is very important to find a job that does fill you up and just at least doesn't suck the life out of you. That's not normal. That's been normalized, that like, oh, you do what you got to do to pay the bills. And we can do that. Sometimes we just have to. But I think sometimes we get stuck there, and then we begin to think that that's just what it is. You go to work, you hate the week, but you live for the weekends because that's when you get a break. But I don't want us to normalize that for ourselves, because we spend so much of our time at work that we just deserve to like it, to at least like it. I'm not saying it has to be your favorite thing in the world, but to feel like you are developing some kind of skill, that it fills you up in some kind of way. It motivates you, it challenges you, it inspires you, and that you can outgrow jobs too. There could be a cap and it's time to move on. But I think if you are in that position where you have to take a job for the meantime, don't forget that that's why you took it, for the meantime. It's not for forever. If you're to the point where it's sucking the life out of you and it's driving you crazy, it's time to start coming up with your strategy to move forward so you're not stuck in that, because it is available to you to have a career, to have a occupation that you at least somewhat enjoy, that fills you up a little bit. And again, this is important because it's going to affect your other dimensions of wellness, whether so far we've talked about the social, emotional, environmental, and it may affect one of those, it may affect all of them. And you may not even notice that it's affecting other areas of your life. So that's why it's so important and why these dimensions are all interrelated. I just challenge you to dream a new dream, want more for yourself. It's out there, it's available, it's tangible for you, and you can do it. If you hate your job, you don't have to. You don't have to. And I'm not trying to false positivity or anything. It's just really, genuinely, you don't have to be stuck in that kind of place. And especially now knowing that it's not so much about the job title as it is what it does for you as a person, how it aligns with your values, how it helps your skills, how it motivates you or challenges you. So if you look at it from that lens, you could be like me and find a job such as being a receptionist as super fulfilling and feeling like you're walking through the halls of inspiration when you look at it through that lens. And also, I do just want to acknowledge and say that I understand that it can be scary to leave a job. Even if you hate the job, it can be scary to leave, to try something new. It's uncertain sometimes, and our jobs affect our actual real lives. So we can't just be out here quitting and not be able to feed our families or pay our bills. That's a scary and vulnerable thing to do, especially if you've never sought a job for how it fills you up. You just sought it for money. It's a new experience, so that's going to be scary. But I encourage you to work with that. Don't shy away from it. Don't be afraid of your feelings of being afraid. It's okay, and that's normal, and you can work through it. And I'm not trying to rush you. You can move at your own pace. It's just great to try to challenge yourself because we do spend so much time at work. I think it's important to at least slightly enjoy it, as I said. So maybe if you are at a place where you're just like, I really just don't see how I can leave, and you may even have 1,000 reasons why you can't, and they could be very valid reasons why you can't leave that job that's sucking the life out of you. But instead of saying, I can't leave because of X, Y, and Z, how about we start saying, I can't leave yet. Start there. Let's start with the reframing and the reshaping of our perspective of this, because yes, you may have valid reasons. You can't leave the job because you need the money. You can't leave the job because you're maybe the only one that works or you need to pay certain things off. Okay, let's make the plans. Let's start somewhere. And while making plans to leave, planning can be very overwhelming for people. So let's just start with reframing our mindset of, I may not be able to leave yet, if you're in that position. And I hope when you say that to yourself, that I'm not able to leave yet, that you can feel the difference in that. I feel I'm not even in that position, and I can feel a physical difference from when I say, I can't leave my job because of XYZ. I have bills to pay. I need to do this, whatever, versus I can't leave yet. It's like adding a little bit of hope to the end of your sentence. So overall, occupational wellness is a real thing. That's the message that I want you all to get from this today. It's real, it's available, it takes time, but it is there, and you should have it, and you should seek it. You should pursue that. Remember, occupational wellness is less about what you do and more so what it does and how it aligns with your values and how it makes you feel and how it's meeting your needs. Really, the world is your oyster in this scenario. Yeah, I normally try to offer like a tool or technique, right? For this episode, I just have maybe 2 questions that you can ask yourself to help you evaluate where your level of occupational wellness is. First question, do I find my job motivating or interesting? Do I find my job motivating or interesting? Second question, how does it contribute to the type of life I want to live? So, do I find my job motivating or inspiring? And how does my job contribute to the lifestyle I want to live? I want to circle back to the stay-at-home moms and the students that I was talking to. And especially to maybe the moms that feel like I'm a stay-at-home mom because I have to be, or I want to be. It could be a mix. I'm one of those people that's like, I do want to stay home, but I also will go crazy if I don't work. Some people dream of quitting their job so they can do that. And that's the work that they want to do. They want to be the stay-at-home mom. And that is work. And that's might be what fills them up. But other moms, like myself, want to be able to work. And so you just have to be honest with yourself about what it is that you truly want. I realized I could not show up for my kid as the best version of myself, the best version of the mom version of myself for him if I felt like there was a void in work for me. So I work part-time from home, and that's what works for me right now. But you may need to be a mom that returns to work if you feel like that's going to help you feel a little bit more full in life. And that's okay. Same thing with students. If being a full-time student is too much and you need something else, maybe it's time to go part-time. Or if it's part-time and you're working too much, other jobs or whatever, and your heart is really there with being a student, you may need to switch to full-time. I know that's a more nuanced conversation because being a student is expensive. I absolutely get it. I'm just saying to maybe explore your desires so that whatever your job is, whether it's a 9-to-5, whether it's an entrepreneur type thing, whether it's something completely not traditional style of work, evaluate and see if it is filling you up and meeting your needs. So again, those two questions one more time. Do I find my job motivating or inspiring or interesting? And secondly, how does it contribute to the type of life I want to live? Explore the feelings that come up when you answer each of those questions. Just start there. Take your time, work with that. The goal here is just to gain awareness and kind of do a temperature check with yourself. If you do find your job motivating, inspiring, interesting, that's great. And it fits well with your lifestyle, that's great. That might mean that you may not have to do any work right now. You can maybe periodically check in with yourself and see if you still feel that way. Because sometimes you can, and then 6 months from now, you may not. Or stuff may happen at work and you may not. So those are just good check-in questions. If they are not interesting and motivating and it's not aligning with the type of lifestyle you want to live, you can maybe see this as an opportunity to change things up. And of course, that can look like a variety of ways. It could look like taking advantage of the opportunities and benefits that are there at your current job or your situation. And it can also look like you finding new opportunities and new careers. So I could keep going, but I hope I've been clear. I hope that this has resonated with somebody, and at the very least it's given you something to think about and consider. I hope that you guys do check out the visual version of this episode over on YouTube. Again, the show is just called the Gradually Well podcast. It should come right up. And don't forget to rate the podcast. This week I'm going to promote the YouTube though, so check that out. Subscribe to this channel so you get the notifications and you won't miss out. Share it with a friend, and don't forget to ask yourself those 2 questions. All right, that's gonna be a wrap. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Bye.